cold winter came. The days grew shorter and the nights darker. I lived in a small town, but there was a school, a hospital, a church, and many shops. There used to be a hospital for the mentally ill. It was closed about 6 years ago because there were no more patients. The last one died, and the authorities did not want to maintain it. I was 16 at the time. I was a normal teenager. I studied at school, socialized with friends, and often went out in the evenings. Our class was very friendly, and we often hung out on the 3rd floor during recess. During one of these breaks, we started talking about the old abandoned hospital. We told different stories, and it turned out that some of us had relatives who had been treated there. Class was finally over, and everyone started to go home. I decided to take a little walk around town. Simon and Oliver, my childhood friends, and 2 of my classmates, Amanda and Emily, decided to join me. We walked slowly, talking about teachers and tomorrow's physics test, until we were near the hospital. As we looked at each other, we realized that each of us was drawn to the hospital. Without thinking, we walked up to the main entrance. The door was closed, as expected, so we decided to walk around the building. "There's an open window over there on the 2nd floor," Simon shouted. As they approached, they found boxes and crates scattered about. They organized an improvised ladder, but no one dared go any further. Then Oliver, muttering something, exhaled loudly and began to climb up. A minute later, he was there. "Everything okay?" we asked. "Yeah, come on up." The boys climbed up first, then the girls. There was a long hallway in front of us with a few chairs and a wheelchair a little farther away. The light from the window only illuminated a small part of the room, so we turned on the flashlights on our phones and moved on. The doors on either side of us were numbered. There was nothing interesting in the old dilapidated offices, broken beds, torn mattresses on the floor, a few chairs. The deafening silence of the room was broken only by the sound of our footsteps. As we continued, we saw a stairwell around the corner. As before, Oliver decided to go first. After a few steps, he felt the floor shake beneath him. Another moment, and the boy fell to the 1st floor with a thud. Everyone jumped and stepped back. "Ollie, are you okay? Are you alive?" "I'm alive, but my leg is crushed under the floorboards. Can you help me?" Without hesitation, we ran down the stairs. Climbing over the rubble, we came to what we thought was the spot of our fallen comrade, but there was no one there. Shocked by what had happened, we began to search for our friend. An inspection of the offices on the 1st floor yielded no results. Slowly, panic set in among us. Simon decided to call the emergency services, but for some reason there was no connection. I glanced at my phone to make sure it wasn't picking up either, and then I looked at the battery level. It was showing 8%, although I remembered it was over 60% when I left the school. After walking through all the wards and offices, we came to a massive door that was slightly ajar. Without thinking, I walked over and looked inside. A pungent smell of rot immediately hit my nose. We looked around and realized that this was the site of a church service. There were broken pews and garbage everywhere. An uncomfortable chill ran down my spine, and every cell in my body resisted every time I walked further. As a group, we walked down the aisle toward the altar, looking around and peering into every dark corner. As we walked farther and farther, the stench became brighter and more tangible. I stared into the darkness ahead of us until horror froze in my eyes. Oliver was crucified on the cross, blood dripping from his hands, his head bowed to his chest. The girls began to weep with fear. Suddenly, Amanda stopped and stared into the corner with glassy eyes. When I pointed the flashlight there, I jumped back and almost dropped my phone. A woman in a black cloak stood in the corner holding a dagger. Her face was covered with many protruding veins, and her eyes were completely white, with no pupils. She shifted her gaze from Oliver to us, until her face twisted into an intimidating smile. Without a second thought, we ran for the exit. From the sounds behind us, the wild lady was following us at breakneck speed. Almost at the exit, Amanda tripped and fell, bloodying her knees. As we turned to help, we saw to our horror that Amanda was sliding across the floor in the opposite direction from us. Our friend sobbed and cried for help until we heard screams of death and the sound of blood. Shaking with fear, we ran for the exit, but we forgot that the front door was locked. What should we do? "This way, quickly!" I shouted, pointing at the iron door. We locked it behind us and went down the stairs, taking a quick look at the room we found ourselves in. It was a morgue. On either side of us were refrigeration rooms, some of which were open. A gurney stood alone in the corner. Me, Emily, and Simon started to move deeper into the room when suddenly there was a long growl somewhere in front of us. Fear gripped our bodies and we didn't know what to do. Our hands were shaking and our legs were trembling. It seemed to be the end. After a moment, a large, hairy creature emerged from the darkness. Its eyes were blood red, its lower jaw was missing, and its arms were dragging on the ground, leaving claw marks. The monster was breathing heavily and probably looking right at us. Just then, Simon pushed us back towards the stairs. "Get out now!" he shouted, turning to face the monster, who didn't hesitate to pounce on his friend and start clawing at him. I stiffened as I felt Emily yank my arm hysterically. A second later, we were running to the first floor. As we opened the door and sprinted out of the morgue, we heard a woman's approaching laughter and inhuman rapid footsteps. We decided to get out of here the same way we got into the hospital, so we ran up the stairs to the second floor and, finding the right room, jumped out the window. Luckily, we landed safely and headed straight for the police station, looking back at the ominous building. After our appeal, the building was searched inside and out several times, but nothing was found except fingernail marks on the floor. Our classmates were reported missing and searched all over the state, but to no avail. 6 months have passed since that day. In all that time, I haven't spoken a word, no matter how hard my parents or the doctors tried. The gray sky hung low over the forest, heralding rain. The wind howled. Jake shivered and pulled his jacket tighter around him as he and Ryan walked deeper into the thicket. "Are you sure we're going the right way?" Ryan asked hesitantly, looking around. "Sure," Jake said. "The map shows that the ruins of the old camp should be somewhere." His words were cut off when he looked at the map on his phone and saw an old, faded brochure in front of him. The cover read, "Camp Red Glade. Welcome." "Here," Jake said excitedly. He picked it up and took a quick look at the camp program, then put it in the inside pocket of his jacket. "It's probably around here somewhere. Let's go," Jake said with an enthusiastic smile and started walking. Suddenly, something flashed in front of them, making them jump and stop. "Did you see it?" Ryan whispered. "I saw it. It sounded like a human figure darting between the trees." There was an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of the wind in the trees. We stopped and looked around, but seeing no one, we decided to move on. A moment later, a chilling laugh echoed through the forest. The boys turned their backs, flashlights in hand. "What the hell?" Ryan wondered. Jake shook his head, his face white as chalk. The same laughter came again, the same crazy, terrified laughter. It sounded close to them, like someone was standing a step away. The friends sprinted forward along the path, stumbling and breathing hoarsely with fear. Their laughter followed them, echoing in their ears. The trees grew closer and closer, but there was a clearing ahead. They ran into the open clearing and stopped dead in their tracks. Jake and Ryan saw a sad sight. In the middle of the clearing were the ruins of what had once been a summer camp for children and teenagers. Houses that had been almost completely destroyed and burned to the ground. Broken boards that had once served as furniture, twisted metal beds, and broken lockers were everywhere. Everything seemed drenched in ash and destruction. Even the ground was littered with ash and debris, as if the camp had been ravaged by an apocalyptic fire. "What the hell happened here?" Ryan exhaled and looked around in horror. Jake didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the pieces of cloth hanging from the branches of the trees, some of which looked like soaked children's clothes. A little out of their stupor and forgetting the laughter that had followed them, the boys moved deeper into the ruins, looking around carefully. Their footsteps echoed in the dead silence. A few yards away, they could see some burnt objects scattered on the ground. As Jake looked closer, he realized that they were toys, charred teddy bears and dolls, the rusty hulks of bicycles and scooters, a jumble of children's stuff in the middle of this frightening place. Ryan looked around. He couldn't shake the oppressive feeling that someone was watching them from the dark shadows. After a few moments, he looked straight ahead and saw the tracks of small children's shoes in the ash. Seeing the footprints abruptly cut off, the boys started to run, but it was too late. A cold, grave darkness was gathering around them, in which humanoid, blurred figures began to appear. One of the silhouettes opened its mouth, and a piercing scream, full of rage and seeming desperation, rang out. Dozens or hundreds of screams followed, joining in a deafening chorus. Stunned, the boys covered their ears as best they could and huddled together. The screaming grew louder, cutting straight into their brains. Jake felt tears trickle down his cheeks. This was probably the end. But the screaming stopped as suddenly as it had begun, and images flashed before his eyes. They seemed to be visions of the past associated with this place, scenes of pain and death. We saw a group of boys around a fire. They're having a good time. Now they are running in panic through the camp, engulfed in flames. We saw fun games and songs at the tents. Now only charred remains and scraps of clothing. The images flashed back and forth, more and more monstrous and nightmarish. Suddenly, Jake felt something hard under his arm. Through the shroud of horror, he forced himself to look down and saw an old, burned book lying in the ashes. Shivering, he picked it up. "Ryan, look," Jake gasped and opened the book. The pages were yellowed and charred at the edges, but the text was still legible in places. It was the diary of someone on staff at Camp Red Glade. As you read it, a shiver ran down your spine at the horrible facts revealed. It turned out that the camp was a place of brutal rituals. Children were the victims of bloody rituals carried out by a secret cult to which all the staff obeyed. "Was it really true?" Ryan whispered, shaking inside. Jake nodded, unable to utter a word. The horrible reality was revealed to them. The camp was a hellish forge where monstrous tortures and rituals were performed. Now it was clear why the ghosts of the dead children haunted the place. Their martyrdom had been a source of such concentrated rage that even after many years, it remained absorbed in this cursed land. Ryan looked up and saw the empty eye sockets of one of the ghosts looming over them. Blood-curdling words hung in the air. "Now you too will become part of our camp." Ice-cold terror gripped Jake and Ryan as the disembodied hands of the ghosts reached for them. Jake, overcome with fear, grabbed his friend's sleeve and pulled him away. They darted between the ruins, stumbling and bumping into the rusted wreckage of the playgrounds. Jake saw a gap in the trees ahead and charged through it, dragging Ryan with him. The screaming continued behind them, the sounds of the pursuit getting closer. Gasping for breath, the friends ran out onto a narrow forest path. They could still hear the chase in the distance behind them, but here, in the forest, they could at least get away. At some point, Ryan stumbled and tumbled down the slope. Jake braked sharply, ran over to him and helped him to his feet. His face was scratched, his t-shirt torn. "Are you okay?" Jake exhaled and looked into his eyes. Ryan nodded, gulping for air. "I'm fine. Let's go." They were back on the road, running as fast as they could. The shouts and sounds of the chase had died down somewhere behind them, but the boys didn't dare to stop. The only thing that mattered was to get as far away from here as possible. Suddenly, there was a glimmer of light ahead of them, and they ran out into the outskirts of a small town. Houses flickered around them, and the road and the occasional car came into view. Jake and Ryan collapsed on the grass, exhausted, trying to catch their breath. They seemed to have escaped the clutches of hell itself. In the small town of Salem, Massachusetts, there were legends of a sinister witch named Abigail, who lived in an old mansion on the outskirts of town. She was said to have been powerful and ruthless in life, and after her death, her spirit remained in the house, guarding a mysterious artifact. John, a young paranormal researcher, became interested in the artifact. He decided to infiltrate the abandoned house to uncover its secrets. After overcoming the overgrown yard and breaking down the door, John stepped inside. Dust covered the antique furniture, cobwebs hung from the chandeliers. Faded portraits in massive frames hung on the walls, seemingly watching his every move. The man walked around the house looking for anything that looked like a mystical artifact, but found nothing. Desperate, John began climbing the creaky stairs to the attic. Fortunately, he found ritual equipment, various blades, skulls, candles, herbs, and the like. Any one of these things could have magical powers, but how could he find out which one? Suddenly, the man heard whispers from the corner of the attic. He came closer. In the corner were pieces of broken furniture and a pile of junk covered with a cloth. The sound seemed to be coming from there. John lifted the edge of the cloth and saw a box wrapped in chains. The lock on it was covered with strange symbols. John listened, and there was indeed a mysterious whisper coming from the box. "Here it is, the artifact!" the man shouted and headed for the exit. At that moment, the walls cracked, and a rumbling sound rippled through the room. It was as if the house would not let go of its guest. John quickly descended the stairs and headed for the exit. As he ran out of the house, the door slammed shut behind him, and the rumbling stopped. When John was a safe distance from the mansion, he turned and looked around. Everything was fine except for what appeared to be some sort of silhouette in the window. Without giving it much thought, John got into his car and drove home. All the way home, he felt like someone was following him, but there was no one behind him. Once home, the man breathed a sigh of relief and went straight to the garage. He couldn't wait to find out what was inside the mysterious box. After trying every possible way to open the lock without success, John decided to cut it with a circular saw and get to work. At the last moment, just as the lock was about to be cut, the blade snapped off and went right through the box. "Oh, damn it!" John yelled, turning off the power to the saw. At the same moment, the lights in the garage started flashing like crazy, and then the power went out in the whole house. The man grabbed a flashlight and went down to the basement to check the electrical panel. All the way down, he had the strange feeling that someone was watching him. When he got down to the basement and flipped the switches, the power came back on. As he climbed back up the stairs, John heard the same whispering behind him that he had heard in the witch's house. He turned and peered intently into the basement. There was nothing suspicious down there. The whispering was gone. Citing his imagination, John grinned and continued upstairs. But when he looked up, the man was paralyzed. At the top of the stairs stood a woman in a red dress with a terrible face. The only eye, wide open, stared straight into her soul, and in the place of the other was a deep bleeding wound. The mouth was distorted with disgust and rage. Gulping for air, John couldn't believe his eyes and was afraid to blink. The next moment, as the man staggered backward, keeping his eyes on the intruder, the woman stunned him with a demonic scream. John tumbled down the stairs, hit his head on the floor, and lost consciousness. When he woke up, the man immediately ran to the box. It seemed to have something to do with the recent events in his house. He cautiously approached the carved box and opened it. Inside, on faded velvet, lay a porcelain doll in a red dress. The head had been punctured, probably from a botched opening with a circular saw, and one eye was missing. Then John realized that by accidentally smashing the doll's head, he had released the witch's evil spirit. Not wanting to be alone with the doll, the man decided to get rid of it. He took it to a nearby river and threw it into the current. The whole story with the doll made John very tired, so when he returned home, he washed his face and went to sleep. He had nightmares and visions of Abigail's past. He woke up in the middle of the night, lying on his side, and saw the doll sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at him with burning red eyes. John wanted to scream in terror, but no sound came out of his mouth. What's more, the man couldn't move. It was like sleep paralysis. Other than the doll in front of his eyes, there was nothing unusual in the room. The sound of the clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, and even voices from the street. John looked around the room in confusion, hoping it was just a bad dream. But as he looked up, he He saw a frightening face on the headboard of the bed, looking right at him. It was the same witch. As soon as John spotted her, the woman leaned over him, grabbed him by the throat, and began to strangle him. The man could do nothing. He was like a fly in a spider's web. Gradually, his mind began to cloud over, and John fell into darkness. His body was found a few days later. There were no signs of violence. The pathologist diagnosed cardiac arrest. The police who searched the house found nothing but a sawed-off box with a lock and chain.